Today on Something to Talk About, another great story of a local person trying to connect with their origins. But in this edition of Something to Talk About, someone later in their life trying to connect with their origins. That's all ahead in the conversation on Something to Talk About. Welcome again to Something to Talk About, and here we are at King's, yet another University of Guam Press author. Dr. Arthur Jackson is with me, as we've said, formerly known to me as Uncle Art. I got to tell you, when we set up the interview for this, when they said Dr. Arthur Jackson, I thought it was some white guy from the mainland, and it turns out to be my dad's first cousin. So there you go. I walked in and I said, "You're the doctor. You're the uncle." Well, hello and welcome home.
Well, thanks, Patty.
It's good to
Thanks
see
so
you, Uncle
much.
Art.
It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's good to have you back in the hood like this.
Right, like in the hood. Yeah.
How long has it been since you've been back?
No, we were here 2 years ago because at that time we had our we have a daughter that lives here still. She teaches up at Dodea, and so we have two grandsons. The oldest one graduated 2 years ago. He's now attending the University of Portland. The second guy just graduated last Friday.
Oh my gosh.
So we were here primarily for that reason. But because we also had this book that we recently had published and printed, and we decided that we were going to make some distributions of that copy to some of the family and some of the other people that might be interested.
I'm understanding that this publication originally, what did it start off to be something that you were just sort of dabbling in to research your history?
Right. On my dad's side, that's where the Jackson, comes from, and we all know that he came from either New York or somewhere up in the northeastern part of the United States, could be Canada, and so it was very interesting. But it's all kind of like the family talking about this, talking about that, but nobody really can produce anything. Any documents or anything like that. And being that, my training is as a researcher because I have a PhD, right? And I felt like that I wasn't going to take this at face value. And so I started digging, only to discover that there wasn't much.
That you had no past history on the Jackson side?
No, we didn't have much. And so that's kind of what... The book is basically about your grandfather, not your father. No.
Okay.
It's about my grandfather who came out here, who came to Guam in November of 1903.
Okay.
He reported into Marine Barracks, Guam.
Wow.
And so he led a pretty interesting life, and so the book sheds, light on his life experiences.
But you didn't know where he came from? Like you just knew it was upper northeast of North America?
Right.
Okay.
Because even among the family members, there were some would claim that no, Grandpa, we call him Pa. He's from he came from New York. He was born in New York, upstate New York. Okay, and a couple of others were saying, no, he was born in Nova Scotia, Canada. And so it was like Nova Scotia, New York.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do a biography, you have to you have to kind of proceed scientifically.
Yeah.
You can't say, well, we think he's here or thinks he's there. So we actually we use different means to do our research. We use Ancestry.com. There are pro-genealogists.
Did that help at all?
Yes, it did, to a degree, and I'll maybe explain that a little bit more. We also contacted the archive at up in Nova Scotia, Halifax, and we talked to them, and we said, you know, we think that our grandfather, my grandfather, was born in Nova Scotia. So they did quite a bit of, they were very helpful. I was very surprised, I was very pleased that you can call and just on the phone, half these guys pretty much jump right into it and
Wow.
got their researcher, their senior archivist, and you know, and then reported back, unfortunately, that they don't have any records. But at least
you know the process.
Exactly. You know, at least we kind of looked into that and see whether there is really a connection, whether he was in fact born there. And so up to now, I hate to say this, but we still don't have his birth certificate or anything like that. You know, I guess.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
But what did your dad think? What did your dad?
Well, he's very, you know, he honestly feels that his dad came from upstate New York, from Adams Center, and which kind of leads me to believe that there's probably more credence to that, because his Marine Corps enlistment papers, what he put on there is that his birthplace is Adams Center, New York. But I wanted to see whether, in fact, there's a possibility that he could have been born in Canada and
then
they
moved
had
down.
moved down there.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
back in the 1800s, the border between Canada and the
New
United
York,
States is pretty porous.
It was loose.
Yeah,
it was loose,
there were no control. I mean, people can go migrate down to the United States, or they can go the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And so, at this time though, there's a couple of things that the pro-genealogist came up with, which is that we know in fact who his father was, which is, everybody thinks that it's Arthur is his first name. It's actually William Arthur Jackson.
Oh.
We also found out that his mother's name is Lillian Nellie Young. So at least we know that much. Now, when did his dad pass away and when did his mom pass away? It's still a mystery.
Well, from then, he found. Your dad came to Guam. I mean, your grandfather came to Guam. How did he stay here? I mean, after the military, he left after the military. How did that happen? What was the connection then?
Let me say this. Arthur William Jackson, my grandfather, loved the Pacific. He loved Guam. And so when he left New York State, apparently where he could have come from, and enlisted in the Army at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas in 1900, he never actually returned back to the mainland United States. He chose, when he completed his tour of the Marine Corps, he decided Guam is home.
And so he stayed here. Who did he marry?
Okay, that's a good question. Initially, his first marriage was to Herrero Caminga, my
Your
dad's
grandmother.
mom. And from that marriage came my dad,
Right.
and his siblings. And then that didn't work out. And then he remarried to a Meno from Menarahan.
Okay.
And they had 6, 7 kids. It's all in the book. And so,
I see. Okay.
so-
Well, see, this is where my family tree comes in, because once your
Yeah.
father married an Untalan,
That's right.
That's where my origins come, because
Exactly.
your father and my grandmother were brother and sister.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So you decided this would then now turn into a book. It became a bigger thing.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
As I dug into it, you know, and I did the research and everything, I found more information to include his incarceration in Japan during World War II. Incidentally, he was one of the oldest American POWs in Japan
Wow.
during the Second World War. And they were all interned, because he was an attorney. He was very careful. He kept a diary, and so he never referred to himself as a POW.
Oh, yeah.
He always referred to himself as
Yes.
an intern.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, an internee.
Right.
And so you know, he was there in Japan when they dropped the atomic bomb.
And so that's how he was taken into captivity. They were rounding up Americans.
They rounded up the Japanese when they invaded in 41. They rounded up all those people that were Americans, whether they were still in active service or retired. It doesn't matter. That's where the Nelsons and all of these other people
Right.
were rounded up down to the plaza, and they were boarded on the ship
And taken off to
taken
Japan.
off to Japan, and they spent the rest of the war
So
years
by
until
this time, I'm
1945.
assuming your dad hadn't yet even been born.
Oh no, he was.
Yeah. He was born.
Oh yeah.
I'm
yeah.
I'm trying to find the
Yeah.
time references, because we're
Yeah,
talking about.
okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, okay, we're going to do a little math here, because I'm really bad at it. We're going to take a break here with Dr. Arthur Jackson. He wrote a book, and we want you to know about it. We'll take a break. Be right back. Welcome back to Something to Talk About. We're with Dr. Arthur Jackson, retired Army National Guard, retired from the University of Guam also
Right,
as
right.
well. Now he's an author,
Well,
Arthur the
yeah.
author, unwittingly an author.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was something that you sort of not stumbled onto, because you weren't planning to have this book about your grandfather necessarily
right.
published and distributed as much as you wanted it for sort of like a family story.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right, Patty. I didn't really set out to put together a book. I just wanted to capture some information about my grandfather, Arthur William Jackson, and distribute that among the family members. That was the game plan. But as I got into it, like I was mentioning earlier, it became almost like a natural progression of things.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got this, we got that, and I hear everybody saying, we don't have any information about Grandpa, So I said, well, maybe then this is
The math was that your grandfather was born in 1880. You were born in 1941.
correct.
And so was there an occasion for you to have ever come into paths?
Oh yeah. I remembered him. Because he and my father were very close. They were very close, and so his favorite dessert, I guess, treat, is apple pie. And I remember my dad and I going to the Palomo Bakery, I think it was,
gosh.
in Barrigada.
Oh, it's still there. It's a
It's still
Palomo
there?
store.
Okay. And buying, these fresh apple pies, and then bringing it over to his residence in Radio Barrigada, right?
Wow.
And so we'll give that to him, and I as a little boy of about 9, 10 years old, I'm very observant too.
Yeah.
Maybe that runs in the family.
I think it does.
Yeah.
I got
And
that too.
I saw his face light up when we give him the pie and everything. And then, of course, after we'd have the dessert, then it was like he and my dad would just chat. They
Wow.
love to talk.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably from the, there's got to be some Irish blood in there somewhere.
Did you ever find out what your
yeah, pretty
ethnicity
much.
was?
Yes, yes. I went through the Genographic project, you know, which is National Geographic, and I had the swab and everything, and I send that in. And it's an interesting question that you brought up because I'm always like wondering, so what am I? You know, what's
Yeah.
my DNA?
Yeah, you knew you had the Chamorro in you.
Yes,
There's
yes.
no question about
and,
that.
And that
then-
was, Patty, this is just incredible. Somewhat deviating a little bit, but yeah, I found out that 20% of my DNA is Northern European.
Yeah.
And so I'm able to, and then when you go and look at the breadcrumbs, you know, that is the part of the Genographic project, you, it traces to, eventually it traces to places like Ireland, Scotland, and that part of Europe.
Wow.
And so it's there. And so I said, okay, now I know what I
Now you know what your genes are.
exactly. You know, and so we all pretty much have the same thing, and
Yeah.
and which is probably Northeast Asian, coming from the Antillans.
My kids just did that too. It's pretty interesting. They're tracing themselves.
Yeah.
What astonishes me is that you, out of curiosity, and no offense about your seasoned age at this point, you know,
Go
a
ahead.
mature man having been born, you know, during a wartime, you know, and post-war, and having the foundation that you've had, rooted in Guam for sure through your mother. I know that you spent a lot of time growing up on the mainland as well. To, at your age, go look back and go, what else am I? That's kind of interesting for someone who's of mature age, don't you think?
Well, yeah, the curiosity was always there, but you know the tools were
Limited, yeah.
were not available.
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
say 15, 20
Sure.
years ago, and it became sort of popular, you know, fairly recently. Because of the Ancestry.com
Yeah.
commercials that you
Yeah.
see, you know, who am I? I thought it was American Indian, but I'm dancing with, you know, this. I've discovered I was Scottish.
Yeah, you're wearing a kilt.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You know, you've seen the commercial.
Yeah.
You know, and so
That's funny.
So that what you know, I did mine about maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, and so, but you're right. It was something that was sort of in my bucket list, you know, that I wanted to do, and of course, being part of the University of Guam for many years, I had that, I guess, how do you say it? I always was very interested in finding out more, doing research, because to me it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Researching something, you know, especially if you're doing it about family.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It's very interesting, and it's shareable.
Yeah.
You know,
I love
can
research.
actually-
I
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, in my
So-
job, there's a lot of research that has
Yeah.
to be done on the fly.
Right.
Yeah, because you know we
Yeah.
don't have a whole lot of time to spend.
Yeah.
The book now then does it tell stories about not only local experiences but named local families? Would this be something of interest to people who
Oh yes.
are still alive on Guam now?
I'm glad that you mentioned that. Just last year, before we published the book, and by the way, it's copyrighted.
Okay.
I've got a U.S. copyright for it. My daughter called me, I think it was around October, and she said, "Dad, I'm visiting Rena Calvo here in Los Altos." Former Governor Paul and Rose, Calvo, they still have their residence in Los Altos.
Right.
So our daughter Jareen and Rena are very close friends. So she was visiting one time, and so she noticed on the wall a eulogy, framed and everything. And so she noticed that the eulogist was A.W. Jackson. And so she asked Rena, says, "Do you know whether my dad and your grandfather McDonald, did they know each other?" And so anyhow, she immediately called me and she said, explained to me what was going on. And I said, yes, your grandfather wrote the eulogy for Marine Sergeant Major McDonald, one of his buddies, when he passed away in
Wow.
1938.
So that chance discovery.
Exactly.
No kidding.
It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And so you know, that's
Yeah.
Paul Calvo. Paul Calvo's mom is Mariano McDonald.
Yeah, yeah.
That's her dad.
Wow. And so the book obviously has stories about him. Did you? Then certainly the governor would be interested in some of the stories that he may not have known about,
Exactly.
and others, and
Yes.
other families. Were there other families?
There are other families. We even have a picture there of a picnic which included Auntie Bimeng and Uncle Royal.
Wow, those
up
are my
in Jigo.
grandparents, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Wow.
and you know, and the old man Jackson. I don't know what was the occasion, but there was a photograph. It's in there.
Yeah.
It's
Can
taken
we
of
just
them.
show the book, because
Sure.
you're going to be here for a while, and is this book going to be available on Guam?
Yes, it will be. You know, we're trying to get a sense of the interest. You know,
Sure.
whether how many
So this is him.
people. That's
It's
Arthur
called The
Wayne.
Biography of Arthur W. Jackson, 1880 to 1961, an American pioneer in Guam. Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice. Well, you know, we'll try to give it its due. I would like to thumb through it so we can find out other families who would have an interest in the story.
Yeah.
But congratulations.
Well, thank you, Patty.
It's
Thank
so
you
cool that
much.
you're still doing so good, you know?
Well,
There's hope for me that I see all my elder relatives, you know.
we got longevity on our side.
I'm
you
hoping
know?
so, because
You
the
know?
rate I'm going right
Yeah.
now, I'm not feeling so like I got longevity.
No.
So it helps to run into relatives who are still kicking it.
I'm still, you know, kicking that
I'm so
can,
glad
man,
to hear
I'll
that.
tell you.
I'm so
Yeah.
glad to hear that.
And so it's exciting.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It really kind of keeps you revitalized and energetic, and
Yeah.
everything else. But it's become a passion now, kind of digging into this.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
turned
we're
out
so proud and just thrilled to death that when I came around the corner here at King's, it was just Uncle Art
Yeah.
sitting at the table. Thanks
Yeah.
a lot, Uncle. I
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Patty, and
It's
thanks
my
for
pleasure.
the opportunity,
Yeah.
for this interview, because I like I said again, the initial plan was just to kind of keep it quiet
Yeah.
and everything, but then as we got the ball
Yeah.
rolling, these sort of things are important.
I've got the
so I
biggest mouth in the
appreciate that.
family, so pretty much everybody's going to know about this book. Thanks a lot. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time here on Something to Talk About.